For what reason? For what reason would you do this to someone?
We can't even see our daughter because it's too hard. And it's not Sarah.
Wow, if this one doesn't put a tear in your eye or completely disturb you, I don't know which one will. July 2000, 8-year-old Sarah Payne was playing hide and seek with her siblings in a West Sussex cornfield when a convicted child sex offender snatched her, murdered her, and left her body in a shallow grave. But here's what makes this case completely mental. Her killer had already served time for abduction and attempted rape of an 8-year-old girl just 5 years earlier. The UK lost its collective mind, changed its laws forever, and proved that some monsters should never ever see the light of day again. This is the story that broke Britain's heart and built Sarah's law. Meet Sarah Evelyn Isabel Payne, 8 years old, blonde hair, dark brown eyes, and a smile that could power Brighton for a week. This wasn't some tragic backstory just waiting to happen. She was just a normal kid from Hersham, Surrey, who loved playing with her siblings, adored her grandparents, and was probably looking forward to summer holidays just like every other British kid that year. Then we've got Roy William Whitton, born 1959, an absolute monster who by 2000 had already served time for abducting and sexually assaulting an 8-year-old girl. In 1995, he grabbed the kid from a playground, drove her to a remote location and attacked her. Got sentenced to just 4 years and only served 2, and was out walking free in 1997. That's 3 years before he met Sarah. Here's what makes this case completely crazy. On the day Sarah disappeared, Whitton was driving around in his white Fiat van, probably looking for his next victim. And because Britain didn't have a proper sex offender registry system, nobody knew he was dangerous. Nobody knew he'd already attacked a child. Nobody knew he was just a ticking time bomb. July 1st, 2000. The kind of perfect British summer evening that makes you forget about the rain for once. 8-year-old Sarah was at her grandparents' place in Kingston Gorse, West Sussex, playing outside with her siblings, 2 brothers aged 13 and 11, plus her 5-year-old sister Charlotte. They were playing hide and seek in a cornfield near the house, proper countryside stuff. Sarah wandered off to find a better hiding spot while her siblings counted. It's the kind of thing kids have done for generations. It's innocent, normal, maybe even a little bit boring. But this time, Sarah never came back. The family noticed she was missing around evening time. Parents Sarah and Michael Payne were frantic, naturally. They searched everywhere, called everyone, and by nightfall, they knew something was seriously wrong. Sarah wasn't the type to just wander off or ignore curfews. By July the 2nd, the search has gone national. Police helicopters, search dogs, hundreds of volunteers, media everywhere. The whole country was riveted by the story of the missing 8-year-old girl. But here's what makes this case different than most missing child cases. Sarah is adopted right under her family's nose, in a safe country area where kids are supposed to be safe. There's no dark alleyways, no city streets, no dodgy neighbourhoods, just a cornfield in West Sussex where kids can just play every summer. Within 24 hours, this story had broken Britain's collective heart. Every newspaper, every TV channel, every radio station was covering it. Sarah's parents were on television making emotional pleas, and the nation was collectively holding its breath. But here's what was mental about the response. Everyone got involved. Police from multiple counties, volunteer search parties numbering in the hundreds, even the bloody Navy helped with coastal searches. You see, the British public doesn't usually mobilise like this unless something absolutely horrific has happened. The police search was massive, helicopters flying over cornfields, search dogs covering miles of countryside, divers even checking water sources, forensic teams examining every potential clue. West Sussex became the centre of Britain's attention, and then, on July the 10th, there was a possible sighting at Knutsford services on the M6, a girl matching Sarah's description, but unfortunately, it turned out to be a false lead. July 17th, 2000, exactly 16 days after Sarah disappeared, a body was found in a field near Polborough, about 15 miles from where she was taken. You see, this location wasn't random. It was near the A29, which is a stretch of road accessible by vehicle, but secluded enough to hide a body. The discovery was announced nationally, and honestly, the reaction was like someone had died in every British household. People were crying on the streets. The country went from hoping for a miracle to mourning a child. Sarah's body was identified by police on July 18th. The Payne family released a statement. "We are devastated to have to confirm that our beautiful daughter Sarah has been found dead. We would like to thank everyone for their help and support during this terrible time." But here's the thing that makes this case even more tragic. Sarah's body was naked and had been sexually assaulted. The coroner determined she'd been killed by compression of the neck. Basically, she was strangled. The medical evidence showed she'd been abducted, abused, and murdered within hours of being taken. The autopsy revealed she'd been raped and likely murdered on the day she was taken, then left in a field. The killer had done his damage and just dumped her, like rubbish. Let's talk about Roy Whitting properly, because this is where the case gets absolutely mental. This isn't some random stranger who just suddenly snapped. This is a career paedophile who should have been locked up for life already. You see, in 1995, 5 years before Sarah's murder, Whitting, he abducted an 8-year-old girl from a playground in Langley Green, Crawley. He drove her to a remote location, sexually assaulted her, and then released her. The girl survived, but the psychological damage was obviously horrific. At his trial for that offence, Whitting was sentenced to just 4 years in prison. 4 years for abducting and sexually assaulting a child. He served barely 2 years before being released in 1997. The judge at his parole hearing called him every parent's nightmare, but still recommended release. What an idiot. This was despite police warnings that he posed a significant risk to children. He was 35 years old, single, with no job and a history of sexual violence against children. And here's what makes this absolutely crazy. After his release, he was supposed to be on the local sex offenders register, but the system was so broken that nobody was really monitoring him properly. He could just drive around in his white van, look for victims and nobody would know what he was doing. You see, after Sarah's body was found, the investigation focused on local paedophiles naturally. But here's where forensic science became crucial. The evidence against Whitting was absolutely damning. The shoe evidence. On July 20th, one of Sarah's shoes was found at Coolham, 3 miles from where her body was discovered. This shoe had fibres from Whitting's 1988 white Fiat van attached to it. The forensic analysis showed a perfect match. Fibres from his van were on her shoes. And then the hair evidence. A single strand of blonde hair was found on a t-shirt found in Whitting's van. DNA analysis established there was a 1 in a billion chance of it belonging to anyone other than Sarah. That's basically impossible. It was definitely her hair. Then you got the local evidence. 2 motorists have seen Whitting's white van on the track where Sarah's body was later found. This placed them at the exact location the day she disappeared. And the receipt evidence. Police found a petrol receipt showing Whitting had been at Buck Barn Garage on the A25 the very same day Sarah was taken. This contradicted his initial alibi story. And then you've got the behavioural evidence. After Sarah's body was found, Whitting stole a car and led police on a high-speed chase through West Sussex. He was convicted of dangerous driving and theft, sentenced to 22 months in prison. This all happened in July 2000. the same month Sarah was murdered. The combination of forensic evidence, witness testimony, and his suspicious behaviour during the investigation made it impossible for him to avoid charges. From November the 14th to December the 12th, 2001, Roy Whitton stood trial for abduction and murder at Lewes Crown Court. The trial lasted 4 weeks and became one of the most watched criminal trials in British history. The prosecution laid out the evidence methodically. Forensic experts testified about the fibre analysis, the DNA evidence, the witness sightings, and the timeline that placed Whitting in the area. The case was devastating. Every piece of evidence pointed to Whitting as the killer. But here's what made the trial absolutely crazy. Whitting, he pleaded not guilty. Despite the overwhelming evidence, despite being caught with her DNA in his van, despite lying about his alibis, he still claimed he was innocent. The jury deliberated for less than a day before returning with unanimous guilty verdicts on both abduction and murder charges. On December the 12th, 2001, the foreman delivered the verdicts that would change British law forever. The judge sentenced Whitting to life imprisonment with a maximum tariff of 50 years, which was later reduced to 40. This meant he would be eligible for parole at 89 years old, basically a life sentence in practical terms. The judge called it a truly wicked and evil crime and said the public needs protecting from you for as long as possible. Here's where Sarah's death actually changed the world. Her murder led directly to Sarah's law in the UK, which allows parents to ask police if someone with access to their child has been convicted of or suspected of child abuse. The scheme is officially called the Child Sex Offender Disclosure Scheme, but everyone knows it as Sarah's Law because mother, SARAH Payne, campaigned for it relentlessly after her daughter's death. The law was introduced in 2010 after years of campaigning by Sarah's family. It gives parents and carers the right to request information from police about anyone who has unsupervised access to their children. This includes access like babysitting, teaching, youth work or frequent contact. But here's how it works. Parents and carers can apply to their local police force. Police check databases for convictions or records. Information is disclosed only if the person poses a risk to children. Information can't be passed on to others, like privacy protection. It's a proactive prevention, not reactive after abuse occurs. The good thing, the law has been used thousands of times since its introduction. Parents have discovered their babysitters, tutors, coaches, and others have had convictions of child sex offences. This system has prevented unknown numbers of potential child sex abuse cases. The Sarah Payne trial was absolutely massive in Britain. Every newspaper, every TV news programme, every radio show covered it daily for weeks. The Sun, Daily Mail, The Guardian, The Times, they all devoted massive coverage to every detail of the trial. The level of media coverage was mental, literally hundreds of journalists covering every word, every gesture, every piece of evidence. Court artists sketched proceedings, photographers waited outside for verdicts, TV crews broadcast live from Lewes Crown Court. But here's what made it different. For the first time, the media actually handled the story with appropriate sensitivity. Instead of the usual sensationalisation, this was genuine reporting that focused on the evidence, the process, and the implication for child protection. The public reaction was overwhelming. The trial got higher figures than most soap operas. People were staying home to watch live court coverage. The verdict, it was broadcast live on national television. Britain collectively watched as justice was finally delivered. This is where the case became absolutely historic. The News of the World newspaper, it launched a massive campaign for Sarah's Law after the conviction, led by editor Rebecca Brooks. The campaign was called For Sarah's Sake and ran for months, eventually years. The campaign argued that parents had the right to know if convicted sex offenders lived in their neighbourhoods, similar to Meghan's Law in the United States. It featured massive circulation, front page campaigns every week, petitions with millions of signatures, and direct lobbying of government officials. The campaign became absolutely massive. Over 300,000 people signed the petition within the first month. Politicians from all parties supported the concept. Public pressure reached fever pitch, but here's where it made it controversial. There was legitimate civil liberties concerned about privacy, safety of released offenders and vigilante justice, and whether such schemes actually prevented reoffending. The debate became heated and divisive. The Sarah's Law debate went mental because it highlighted fundamental conflicts in British society, protecting children versus civil liberties, parental rights versus offender privacy, community safety versus individual rehabilitation. Not surprisingly, the Sarah Payne case inspired copycat behaviour and vigilante justice incidents across the UK. Several innocent men were attacked by vigilantes who mistakenly believed they were sex offenders. In Plymouth, a man with learning disabilities was beaten by neighbours who wrongly believed he was a convicted paedophile living nearby. He was actually completely innocent and had never been convicted of any offence. In Manchester, vigilantes burned down a house they believed was occupied by a convicted sex offender, but they actually targeted the wrong address and destroyed an innocent family's home. In London, police had to intervene when vigilante groups organised hunts for suspected paedophiles in various neighbourhoods, based on rumour and misinformation rather than evidence. These incidents highlighted exactly why civil liberty groups had opposed public sex offender registries. When people feel threatened, they often take justice into their own hands, sometimes targeting innocent people. The News of the World newspaper campaign had to address these concerns directly, eventually toning down its rhetoric and focusing on the formal notification system rather than encouraging vigilante action. Roy Whitting is currently serving his sentence at HMP Wakefield, one of Britain's most highest security prisons. It's known as Monster Mansion because it houses some of the most dangerous criminals in the country. Life inside for child killers is, well, let's just say it's not pleasant. Multiple prisoners have tried to attack or even kill Whitting over the years. In 2023, he was stabbed with a makeshift weapon by another inmate and required hospital treatment. Other prisoners view child killers as the lowest form of life. Even murderers consider them beyond redemption. Whitting has been assaulted numerous times, moved between prisons for his own safety, and kept in isolation for months at a time. Prisoners have thrown boiling water at him, attacked him with homemade weapons, and tried to poison his food. He's lived in constant fear for his life since arriving at Wakefield in 2002. The prison authorities have spent millions on additional security measures for Whitting's protection, special accommodation, additional officers, protective custody arrangement, medical treatment for assault injuries, and legal proceedings associated with prison violence. Some might call this justice, a murderer living in fear in prison. Others might call it unnecessary cost to the taxpayer. But either way, Whitting exists in a state of perpetual danger that will last for the rest of his life. So here's what's absolutely crazy about Roy Whitting's case. He never actually admitted guilt, never even shown remorse, never explained his actions, and never apologised to Sarah's family. During his trial, prosecution evidence suggested he was a classic fixated paedophile, someone with persistent sexual interest in prepubescent children. He fit the FBI profile of organised predators who plan their crimes, select victims, and take measures to avoid detection. Psychological evaluations indicated he had antisocial personality traits, a lack of empathy, and poor impulse control. These factors, combined with his sexual deviance, created a dangerous individual who posed ongoing risks to children. But here's what's more disgusting. Whitting had opportunities to receive treatment for his sexual deviance. After his 1995 conviction, he could have participated in prison treatment programs, court-ordered therapy, or community rehabilitation schemes. Instead, he spent the minimum possible term in prison, rejected treatment opportunities, and denied his crimes against the first victim, and immediately returned to sexual offending after release. This pattern, it suggests general psychopathy rather than garden variety paedophilia. The threats against Roy Whitten's life have been constant and credible. Every few months, there's another attempt on his life or another security incident requiring intervention. In 2011, prisoners plotted to kill him with poison in his food. In 2016, an inmate tried to strangle him with a homemade garrote. In 2019, he was attacked in the prison chapel during a religious service. In 2023, he was hospitalised after a stabbing incident. Each attack attempt requires massive security responses, lockdowns, searches, prisoner movement restrictions, investigations and medical treatment, legal proceedings and internal investigations. The most annoying thing is, the cost to taxpayers is astronomical. Some of the other attackers have been other murderers serving life sentences who believed killing a child sex offender would improve their own standing in prison hierarchy. Others are prisoners who've had their own histories of childhood sexual abuse and are seeking revenge. But here's what's absolutely crazy. Despite multiple assassination attempts, Whitten received round-the-clock protection that costs taxpayers thousands of pounds per day. He's protected by the same state he's violated, housed by the same system he's made a mockery of, and kept alive by the same society he's terrorised. The irony hits brutal. The man who showed no mercy to an 8-year-old girl receives protection that most law-abiding citizens could only dream of. Britain's most hated criminal, he lives in fear, but unfortunately, he still lives. The Sarah Payne investigation became a masterclass in modern British policing that's still studied today. The multi-agency approach, forensic innovation, and media management became templates for similar investigations. The West Sussex investigation pioneered several techniques: multi-agency coordination involving multiple police forces, advanced forensic science including palynology and fibre analysis, media management that balanced public interest with evidence protection, community engagement with volunteers and local residents, and technological integration of databases and information sharing. These methods, they became standard practice for major investigations. The case showed that child murder investigations required specialised approaches, dedicated resources and expert coordination. The investigation also highlighted the importance of forensic preservation and evidence chain management. The fact that Whitten was initially released due to insufficient evidence but later convicted based on forensic analysis demonstrated the need for patience and methodical investigation. But here's what makes this case still relevant. The forensic techniques used in 2000 are primitive compared to what's available today. DNA analysis that took weeks then can be done in hours now. Database searches that required manual checking are instant now. The mistakes made in this case couldn't happen today. Shockingly, the debate around Sarah's law isn't over. It's actually getting more complicated in 2025. The internet age has created new challenges that the original campaign couldn't have predicted. The digital age complications, AI generated content creating fake evidence of crimes, deepfake technology allowing people to fabricate accusations, encryption preventing proper monitoring of online communications, and international boundaries making offender tracking more complex. Social media enabling both vigilante justice and community protection. The rise of incel culture, online extremism, and the digital radicalisation has created new categories of potential offenders who may never have direct contact with children but pose indirect risks through online activities. Modern child protections require understanding of digital spaces, international coordination, and prevention strategies that go far beyond geographic monitoring. So, it's been 25 years since Sarah Payne disappeared, and honestly, this case still haunts Britain in ways that are hard to explain to people who weren't there. Every parent who watched the news coverage remembers the feeling of absolute terror. Every child who saw the coverage remembers being told to be extra careful. Every community became hyper vigilant around stranger danger. The case, well, it changed how Britons think about child safety in rural areas. Previously they were considered safe. Sex offender monitoring, previously inadequate. Police protection, formerly trusted implication. rural communities, they're no longer automatically safe, and summer holidays, childhood freedom curtailed, and public spaces, stranger danger reinforced. The psychological impact was massive. Britain children grew up more cautious, more aware of potential dangers, and more protected by parents who understood the risks in a way previous generations hadn't. But here's what's absolutely mental: despite all their changes, all the laws, all the technological advances, the fundamental risks, they remain the same. Children are still vulnerable, predators still exist, and parents still worry. The truth is, Sarah's case changed everything and changed nothing at the same time. It made us aware of the dangers we didn't know existed. It created laws we didn't have before. It saved children we can't count. But it didn't eliminate the threat. It just made us better at understanding what we're dealing with. What you need to understand is, Roy Whitting wasn't some random stranger who just appeared out of nowhere. He was a local man who lived in the area, drove local roads, knew local geography, and had local connections. He was the kind of person who would have seen Sarah and her siblings playing. He would have known about the cornfields, the country lanes, the secluded areas perfect for dumping a body. You see, he wasn't random, he was calculated, predatorial, and local. But here's what makes this still relevant to today's parents. The predators you need to worry about aren't often the people you already sort of know. They're the neighbours who always offer to help with kids, the coaches who coach youth teams, the religious leaders who work with children, the family friends who offer to babysit. They're not unusual, the strangers lurking in dark alleyways. They're the people who seem helpful, trustworthy, and normal because that's how they get access to victims. Sarah's killer drove a white van and lived in a flat in Littlehampton. He wasn't lurking in the shadows, he wasn't driving around in broad daylight looking for opportunities, and that's what's absolutely terrifying about this case. Sarah Evelyn Isabel Payne was 8 years old, blonde with dark brown eyes and a smile that her family says could light up any room. She loved playing with her siblings, visiting her grandparents, and probably had favourite cartoons and toys and dreams about what she wanted to be when she grew up. She was a normal 8-year-old girl who deserved to grow up, make mistakes, fall in love, get annoyed with her parents and get a job and have her own family and just live a kind of normal, boring, happy life that everyone deserves. Instead, her name became associated with pain, grief, injustice, and the word law. Instead of being remembered for who she was, she became defined by how she died and what happened afterwards. But here's what I want you to remember. Sarah didn't die to make a point. She didn't die to change laws. She didn't die to become a statistic or a campaign symbol. She died because a dangerous man was walking free when he shouldn't have been, and nobody stopped him. Remember Sarah Payne, the girl, not Sarah Payne, the victim. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of Britain's most horrific cases, show some love and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.